The Carter Academy for Performing Arts was one of the most prestigious institutions on the East Coast. Tucked into the manicured hills of upstate New York, it catered to the children of the wealthy and elite, politicians, celebrities, and CEOs. Every hallway gleamed, every student wore designer shoes, and every note played in its grand recital hall echoed with entitlement. Claire Middleton, the Academy's star pianist, embodied it all. With years of private training, a Steinway at home, and a record of first-place trophies, she walked the halls with the confidence of royalty. She was brilliant, but also cold and unreachable. No one ever noticed the janitor. Miguel Alvarez was quiet. He mopped the floors, dusted the chandeliers, and polished the music room benches. His uniform was always clean, his eyes kind, and his steps silent. He never interrupted, never spoke unless spoken to. Most students didn't know his name. They moved past him like he was part of the wallpaper, necessary but invisible. But Miguel loved music. He had once been a promising pianist in Mexico, studying with masters until tragedy and poverty forced him to abandon dreams for survival. He immigrated to the US and took work wherever he could. At Carter Academy, though no one asked, he found himself close to what he had lost. Music in the air, keys under his fingertips during late nights when no one was watching. One early morning, Claire arrived at the recital hall before sunrise. She often did. It gave her uninterrupted time to rehearse, but this time she froze in the doorway. The grand piano was open. A man in a janitor's uniform sat on the bench playing. Not just playing, feeling every note. His eyes closed as a haunting Chopin nocturne filled the empty space. The sound was raw, aching, beautiful. Claire cleared her throat sharply. Miguel's hand stopped. He turned quickly, startled. "Miss, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I was just—" She cut him off. "You're not supposed to touch that. This isn't for janitors." Her words were sharp, condescending. She wasn't trying to be cruel, just honest, as she had been raised to be. Miguel lowered his head and stood. "Yes, miss. Apologies." She sat down at the piano without another word and launched into a fast Rachmaninoff prelude, flawless, technically perfect, but emotionless. Miguel left quietly, mop bucket rolling behind him. But something about the way he played lingered in her mind for days. Claire found herself thinking about that morning more than she wanted to admit. His tone had something she didn't understand. She'd won competitions, yes, but her playing had always been about technique. Miguel's, though untrained in recent years, had soul. That bothered her. She began to notice how robotic her own performances were. Every note was calculated, practiced, predictable. The student performance evaluations were just a week away. It was the biggest in-house event of the year. With judges from major conservatories and music programs attending, Claire was expected to be the highlight. Her name was printed on the program next to Liszt's La Campanella, a piece she'd played 100 times. Everyone expected perfection, and she hated that they were right. She practiced harder, longer, pushing herself into exhaustion, but the more she repeated Liszt's piece, the less it meant. There was no spark. The music felt hollow. The night before the performance, she couldn't sleep. Her fingers twitched with anxiety. Her heart pounded, not with fear of failure, but with the fear that failure didn't matter anymore, that maybe she wasn't really playing music at all. On the day of the evaluation, she stood backstage in her best dress, hands icy, breathing shallow. The stage manager called her name. She stepped into the spotlight. The audience stretched into shadows, judges, peers, instructors. The grand piano gleamed under the light. She sat and froze. Her fingers hovered over the keys, but her mind went blank. She couldn't hear the piece, couldn't feel it. Panic surged in her chest. Then her eyes found him. Miguel stood near the curtain with his mop and bucket, watching her quietly. No judgment, no mocking, just patience. And suddenly, something shifted inside her. Claire sat still at the piano, her fingers just above the keys. The silence in the hall stretched longer than anyone expected. Whispers began to ripple through the audience. One of the judges leaned forward, pen in hand, eyebrow raised. Claire's heart pounded in her chest, her mouth dry. The notes of Liszt's La Campanella, once drilled into her memory, were completely gone. Her hands refused to move. She could feel the pressure bearing down on her like a weight. But then her eyes locked again on Miguel. He hadn't moved. He stood quietly near the edge of the curtain, mop in hand, eyes calm. Unlike everyone else, he wasn't judging her. There was no expectation, no disappointment, just a silent presence reminding her of something far more important than perfection. Claire took a deep breath, removed her hands from the keys, and stood up. The gasps were audible. A few in the audience thought she was quitting. Her teacher sat forward, confused, but she didn't walk away. She turned to the judges. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm not going to play Liszt today. I want to try something else." A murmur spread across the audience. The head judge narrowed his eyes, but gave a small nod. Claire turned back to the piano. She closed her eyes. Her fingers found their place, not from memory but from emotion. She began to play the Chopin nocturne Miguel had played earlier that week. At first it came hesitantly, a little unsure. But the more she played, the more it took over her. The music was soft, aching, human. Nothing like what she'd been trained to produce. For the first time, she was no longer performing. She was feeling, expressing. The hall was completely silent. Even her classmates, usually smug, competitive, sat still, as if holding their breath. The melody filled every corner of the room, delicate and raw. When the final note lingered and faded, the silence that followed was full. Not empty, not awkward, but complete. Then the applause came. It started slow, then built into a standing ovation. Her teacher looked stunned. Her classmates stood one by one. The judges exchanged impressed glances. One of them, a representative from a top conservatory, wrote something quickly on a card. Claire stood up from the bench, stunned by the response. She didn't bow. She looked toward the curtain. Miguel was gone. Later that evening, as the crowd left and the lights dimmed, she found him mopping the outer hallway. She approached him, her heels echoing on the polished floor. "You were right," she said. He turned and smiled gently. "I didn't say anything." "But you played something," she replied. He looked at her, then nodded slowly. "Sometimes it's not the loudest music that's heard." There was a pause between them, and Claire suddenly felt the weight of all the years she had played music without really understanding it. "You used to play professionally, didn't you?" Miguel looked away. "A long time ago, in another life." She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded card. "They asked me who taught me how to feel the music today. I told them it wasn't a teacher. It was someone who never speaks in class, but plays with more soul than anyone here." She handed him the card. It was an invitation to perform as a guest at the spring gala concert. He looked at it, then at her, visibly moved. "I sweep floors," he said quietly. "I don't belong on that stage." Claire smiled. "That's where you're wrong." Weeks later, the Carter Academy Spring Gala was a sold-out event. Parents in suits and gowns filled the seats. Cameras rolled. Faculty lined the aisles. But the biggest moment of the night wasn't Claire's flawless solo. It was when a janitor walked quietly to the piano and sat down, hands trembling slightly. He played a piece no one knew, an original. It told a story of loss, hope, and rediscovery. The room was silent. And when it ended, no one moved for a long time. Then they stood, not just clapping but cheering, not for his technique, not for his past, but for the truth in every note.